FPL blank game week 34. Today's complete guide will hopefully give you everything you need to know going into the upcoming game week 34 and the deadline on Saturday morning. We're going to discuss things whether you're on free hit, whether you are wildcarding, or whether you are just planning to play through. We'll cover all of that. We'll talk about some differentials. We'll talk about, is Cole Palmer worth it? Should you be going with Raul Jimenez? Is Cunha too much of a risk? And actually, is Mo Salah the best captain, or where else could you go if you need a punt? What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. And before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. And we're going to dive in and answer some of the key questions to start off. We're going to cover a few little different things in this video just because with so many people on free hit, there's a little bit less need to talk about players to buy in this video and things like that and benching headaches. But we're going to start off with what feels like a big question. If you haven't yet decided if you're going to play your free hit or your wildcard this week, would I look to take a -4 in order to save the free hit to a later week? And if so, when? Or would I look to take a -8 in order to delay the wildcard as well? The answer to both of those is yes. Now, if you're getting into the territory where you're taking a -12 or -16, the answer is then probably no. And it also depends a little bit on if you take the -8, you know, how many players have you got out? Are they good players, etc.? So it is a little bit team dependent. But if you are in the position where you might be able to save the free hit or save the wildcard a week, I do think it's worthwhile. And the reason for is if we get doubles in game week 36 or game week 37, being able to wildcard in game week 35 or play the free hit in the double or the blank is a really strong place to be. If you have a free hit that you could just free hit in the blank in game week 37 and, you know, just buy players for the double in game week 36, that's a really strong place to be. Or you could also free hit in 36 and just buy players who play in game week 37, for example. That is a much better position to be in than the majority of us who are free hitting this week will get to, because we have to limit the amount of players that we could buy in theory if there is a double in game week 36. The similar thing for those of you with wildcard as well. If you want to delay the wildcard to game week 35, when we should know what the doubles and blanks will look like if we get them in game week 36 and 37, will give you a massive advantage. An advantage that is probably worth more than 8 points, which is what you're sacrificing this week. So if you have the ability to save the chips for wildcard 35 or free hit 36, 37, I would do it if you can. But of course, about 60% of the game are going to be playing the free hit this week. So you have to be, you know, cautious that if you don't play it, you probably will end up on a red arrow with the amount of other picks unless you've planned well for this week, which some of you definitely have. Looking at some of the teams on Twitter or on YouTube where people are not playing the free hit but have planned in advance, it is absolutely worthwhile, and some people have done it very, very well. Next up is a talk about the captaincy ranking, and is it as obvious that it should be Mo Salah, who actually has been pretty slow in terms of returns over the past few weeks. Generally, I think there are 3 options that you consider, but actually after the Wolves press conference today, I think there's only 2 options in Mo Salah and Alexander Isak. A few other options that you can consider would be Matheus Cunha as the Leicester at home fixture. I'm not certain I do that with Bellegarde back in training, and we'll talk about that later on. Raul Jimenez away at Southampton, although he's only scored twice since January, and Cole Palmer, we know about his form as well. Those 3 are predicted to do quite well. Their teams are predicted to score quite a lot of goals, but I don't think they come close to both Mo Salah and Alexander Isak. Mo Salah is predicted to be the most highly owned player, the most highly captained player, with 60% of you saying you'll captain him and 20% saying they're going on Alexander Isak. Salah is projected to score more goals than Isak, and the team are projected to score just more goals than Newcastle are this week. I do generally think Salah at home to Spurs, they've scored 4 goals in their last 3 home matches against Spurs. I do think Isak against Ipswich is a good fixture. I do think they will score goals there as well. But I just can't look past an extra midfielder, of course, so the extra point for a goal and a clean sheet if they do keep it as well. Now, if you do want a differential, I think Isak is by far the best one. There are lots of things on free hit that you can do which are differential as well, which we'll talk about later on in the video. But specifically for captaincy, I do think Salah is just best despite the lack of returns recently. Of course, they're chasing the Premier League title in this game as well. I don't think that can be understated. Do think they'll want to put on a show. I do think Salah is, of course, likely to be involved, but Isak offers a great alternative. So then just a little bit of injury news. And actually, there's only really 4 teams that we need to discuss sort of press conference news and injury news from. The first one is Fulham, which was on Thursday. So you may have already seen the quotes that have been floating around. I've shared them on Instagram. I've shared them on Twitter as well. Is that Rodrigo Muniz is ruled out, which basically means Jimenez is going to start for Fulham going into Southampton away, which makes him a really nice option. For a lot of this season, we've been uncertain about which of them we should pick and whether we can pick either because they've been rotating. Does look like Jimenez will start, and he's on penalties as well when he does, which again, he scored twice in one game with penalties. So that makes him a decent option. The other thing is the quote on Sessegnon versus Wilson. Marco Silva was asked in the press conference whether Wilson was ready. He then basically said, he is ready if we need him. He can help us from the start or from the bench. Sessegnon has taken his chance well over the past few weeks as well. He didn't really give anything away. He did imply that Wilson needs minutes, and the whole point is now building him up to fitness. I'm not certain he'll start, but I do think that sub for Sessegnon for Wilson could be scarily close to that 60th minute. But I do think Sessegnon will start. Now, does he play 60? Could he play 55? We have seen Fulham make subs at that sort of area of the game before, and also at 45 minutes a few weeks for Iwobi as well. I do think Sessegnon starts. I do think it comes with a little bit of risk that he might not make 60, but if you think he makes 60, he has to be one of the best defenders in the game. Next one is up at Liverpool. No real fitness updates from them. Nothing real to hint whether Luis Diaz, Gakpo, Jota is going to be the one that starts. Luis Diaz is probably the best second Liverpool player who looks pretty nailed at the moment. There was a little bit of questioning about Conor Bradley versus Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he basically said, Conor Bradley has been great. He's been unlucky not to get more run of starts in the team. It's unlikely that he gets to do that whilst Trent Alexander-Arnold is around, but that's the next step in his development, is being able to put in these performances week in, week out. I generally think from the quotes I take that it is more likely Trent starts than not. Again, I do think the early sub might be there given the minutes we've seen Trent not play and the injury he's had recently. He comes with a very similar risk, and I think the risk for Trent versus Sessegnon feels very close. I expect them both to start. I expect them both to probably just make 60, but they are likely to have early subs, so have a bit of caution if you are picking either of them. Then we're moving to Wolves. In goal, Jose Sarr is back. So if you've got him and you're not on free hit, he is available. But the big news came with Bellegarde. Bellegarde was the player that was keeping Matheus Cunha out of the team when he returned from his suspension a few games ago. Bellegarde then missed the game against Man United where Cunha came back in and started. Now, Bellegarde has trained on Thursday and on Friday, and they said that he can help the team. Now, they didn't say he's ready to start. They didn't say he would start. They also didn't say he wouldn't start. There is a bit of risk now if you do punt on Matheus Cunha. Now, if Cunha starts, he is probably the best pick at Wolves for this game week at home to Leicester. So I do still really like him. I don't think it's 100% guaranteed that he'll start. And I imagine if you're a Wolves fan, drop it in the comments. But I imagine every Wolves fan would like Matheus Cunha dropped, and they would just like to plan for future seasons where they won't have him. And his attitude's not great. But from a footballing point of view, he is, of course, their best attacker. And I think most of us would probably expect him to start and get decent minutes and get some returns as well. But it does just come with a little bit more risk than if Bellegarde had been out. You could just go safer with Strand Larsen, who looks set to play, but Strand Larsen's bonus points and his sort of goal threat and his minutes is just not as good as Cunha if he plays. And then finally is at Newcastle. There wasn't really any quotes on Barnes versus Gordon versus Murphy, for example. Eddie Howe was back. Now, part of me wants to think that with Eddie Howe being back, does he go back to his tried and tested, which was Anthony Gordon? He also basically said he probably would have rotated a little bit more playing 3 games in a week than maybe was done when he was, of course, in hospital. Now that he's fully recovered, he is back in charge, taking over from Tyndall. So I do think that there is a big risk of Barnes. I think he's probably 60% chance and 40% chance that Gordon starts. I do think that Murphy will start out on that right-hand side. I don't see any reason to drop him. Barnes is the high upside, the high explosive pick, but Murphy now feels much safer. The only other thing is Newcastle are hopeful that Cher will be okay for the game. For me, that's not enough to pick him. I've swapped him out of my draft and gone with someone else. It's just not worth the risk. Very briefly, going back to this list of players to buy if you are not on free hit and you're looking to play through between now and the end of the season. In defence, Robinson, Aït-Nouri and Milenkovic with nice fixtures between now and the end of the season look really nice. It will depend a little bit on how the rest of it rotates with the rest of your defence. For example, the only other thing is people say, Harry, why Robinson over Sessegnon? Just with Wilson coming back, I think there are chances between now and the end of the season that Sessegnon doesn't start, and Robinson is pretty much nailed to start all of these remaining games. So if you don't have a free hit or a wild card, I wouldn't be taking a risk on someone like that. In terms of attackers, it's really Forest, it's Brentford, and maybe the odd extra in likes of Jared Byrne and Luis Diaz. If you don't have Mbeumo and you're not on free hit this week, I think he should be the top priority buy. Then it's Visser and Wood up front, Jared Byrne in your midfield alongside Elanga. With Bellegarde coming back and everything happening at Wolves, I probably would go with Visser and Matheus Wissa and Chris Wood, over going with Mateus Cunha now. Moving on to the assistant manager, and I apologize. Outside of my house, the people in the flats opposite are having building work done. Most of the time you can't hear it, but there is a lot of drilling going on, so I hope you can't hear it. Apologies if you can. I'm just going to have to power through. Assistant manager is not that relevant, so maybe not that many people will click into this section anyway. But if you are on assistant manager, I think you've got a few choices. If you don't have triple Newcastle, that is the obvious place. You don't have triple Liverpool or triple Wolves, those are the obvious places to go for sort of punts. Now, the other option is you go for the table bonus game, which most obviously is going to be Brentford away at Nottingham Forest. Table bonus for Brentford, now it is away. Forest have been pretty good at home, but if you are chasing rank, Brentford feel like the most obvious one. But if you're playing it safe, it's probably Newcastle if you don't have a triple up, or it's Liverpool or probably Wolves at home to Leicester. A Wildcard 34 draft. I've been asked a lot about this. There is a short form version of this video already out, but let's just talk about it in a bit more detail. Now, it does play a back four, and what we've gone with is a Pope and Pickford rotation in goal. The only issue with that is you aren't picking a goalkeeper who's likely to double in game week 34. So if you, in game week 36. So you could swap one out for someone like a Kepa at Bournemouth, also has a decent fixture at home to Man United. So you could do Pope to Kepa, for example, and still rotates pretty well with Pickford, who has a couple of nice games left this season. The three City we've gone are the ones that we're going to bench in De Bruyne, Gvardiol and Marmoush. I think they are the best options out of the ones that blank, that then are likely to have doubles and good fixtures for the majority of the remainder of the season. I have gone with De Bruyne as the one. In theory, you could go with someone like a Rodgers there or a Saka, but I think De Bruyne, Gvardiol, Marmoush are the three blanking outfield players that I would go with. Into the defence and midfield and the starting lineup, we're going with Williams, Livramento, Kirkes, Aït-Nouri, all with decent home fixtures, and they rotate pretty well between now and the end of the season when you're adding Gvardiol into the lineup as well. Alanga is the cheap option, and Burmo, Salah and Bowen. I think that pretty much picks itself. You could opt for someone different in terms of Alanga, but we know that the Forest fixtures between now and the end of the season are really nice. And then we've gone with Isak and Chris Wood up front. In theory, if you wanted Wissa, if you wanted a third forward and didn't want to go with Marmoush and wanted to go with Mateus Cunha, that is absolutely fine. But this has an eye on this week, covering off the big picks, but also an eye on game week 35 until the end of the season as well. Looking at Rob T FPL's projections for game week 34, there's quite a lot of interesting stuff in here. So we're going to break it down quite a lot. There are a lot of home teams projected to do very well, and it's why it feels like it's quite a good week to free hit. Liverpool at home to Spurs, you've got Wolves at home to Leicester, Newcastle at home to Ipswich, Chelsea at home to Everton, theory Bournemouth at home to Man United, Fulham away at Southampton, and then Brighton at home to Man United. I do think there are some really good fixtures that you can look to target, and three teams have a 40% plus chance of a clean sheet in Wolves, Newcastle, Chelsea. Liverpool are high up there. You've also got Fulham who are high up there, although they're away from home. Now, there are two fixtures, actually three fixtures, which I do think are more difficult to call. I think Bournemouth, Man United isn't that easy to call because the rest time for the European game for Man United is pretty good. And they've had a free midweek this week. So I do think Man United will put out an okay lineup going into that game. Now, I do expect Bournemouth to win, but I'm not certain at how great a fixture it is. I don't mind Bournemouth defensive assets. I'm not sure I'd be punting on their attack. Forest, Brentford. Now, this game is the Thursday night game, and it feels normal to want a player in that game. But if this was just thrown into the rest of the game week, I don't think we'd really be wanting any players from that. And Burma was just done really well. But Forest defensively at home are very strong. But Forest do play Sunday, and then they play Thursday, and then Monday again. So you have the added Forest fatigue. And I say it again, if they played Saturday 3 o'clock, I don't think there'd be virtually any Forest or Brentford on our free hit drafts this week. I don't think it's a problem if you want part of that game. If you want to go Chris Wood or in Burmo, I had two of them in my draft, and I just think that's overkill the more I look at it. I just don't think that fixture is really one we want to be targeting too much. I think it's quite difficult to call. Then we're looking at Brighton and West Ham again. Brighton have slipped up in games that they shouldn't have done. West Ham look like they'll be lining up with a back five again this week, which I just don't think there's going to be loads of goals. And with Brighton being without some of their key players, this favours Brighton to win this like 2-1, but quite comfortably 2-1. I'm not sure it's going to be that easy for them. So I think generally on my free hit, I'm looking at Chelsea, I'm looking at Newcastle, I'm looking at Wolves, I'm looking at Liverpool, I'm looking at Fulham, and then maybe one player or maybe two players from the remaining games, but probably only one if I want a player on that Thursday night game just to have something to look forward to. So I'm just going to sit back and let's have a look at my free hit draft. I just want to add a disclaimer that there's still drilling going on outside my house. I really hope if you've skipped to this section, you can't hear it, but there's not much more I can do. I'm on free hit this week. I've started to make transfers on Thursday evening. I started to make the first moves, but my team is far from locked in. I like the team that I've built. I think I'm pretty close, but it is definitely not locked in. I just want to caveat that at the point of starting this team. I'm going round and round in circles with quite a few picks. And again, I want to be clear on that I've built a team that I'm happy with, but you might be surprised that it's kind of a boring is best type approach to the free hit this week. I imagine this will be very close to maybe what the template ends up looking like for the free hit this week. And do I want to go for a little bit more exciting? I think the best way for me to do my free hit at the moment is to start boring with the players who I think are safest and then look if there are any of these slightly more risky players I want to take a punt on. So what we've got in the moment is we've gone Leno in goal. I haven't gone with Sessegnon because I think there's a slight risk of his minutes. In terms of defenders, we're going with Aït-Nouri, Cucurella, and then we've gone with Trippier. So Trippier in over Fabian Schär just because of minutes. Aït-Nouri feels nailed, and I like Cucurella. Everton don't score a lot of goals, and his attacking threat feels pretty good. Into midfield, we're going with Murphy. I think he's safer than Barnes just because I have this feeling in the back of my head that we might see an Anthony Gordon start. If I see Barnes on that team sheet, though, I will fully regret not going with him. I think he's a better pick if they both start, but Murphy feels safer. I'm going with Cole Palmer just because of minutes, just because of penalties, just because of no Tarkowski. Again, I don't think it's an incredible pick. I completely get that his form recently is not great, but he is in there. Then it's Mo Salah, captain, and then I've gone with Luis Diaz. It felt really weird in all of my drafts that I only had one Liverpool player in Mo Salah, who was my captain. So what? I expected them to do really well because I wanted to captain Salah, but then I didn't have any other Liverpool players. So it felt a little bit counterintuitive, which I know some of you put in the comments as well. So I've gone with Luis Diaz, who feels like the most nailed. I feel like he's more nailed than Trent. I'm pretty set on not taking a punt on Trent, I don't think. Like, we've seen subs just after 60 for Liverpool before, but it could happen before 60. I don't think Trent will be the one that I punt on. If I want a punt on defense, I think it's more likely to be Sessegnon, given he's actually playing as part of the front three. Then it's Isak, Cunha, Jimenez. So let's start up front. Is it too much to just go with the three strikers, probably on penalties? Cunha, of course, a slight doubt, but all playing, on penalties, all playing very good minutes against the teams in the relegation zone. Is it just too good to turn down? The only one I really have a look at is Chris Wood, and I don't have anyone on that Thursday night game, which I don't particularly love. And Burmo's dropped to first on my bench as well. Jimenez to Chris Wood is about the only thing I'm thinking of swapping in my forward line. Now, I know some of you like Welbeck. I know some of you like Evan Nilsson, and that's fine. I find those games quite difficult to call, and I don't like those options better than a Raul Jimenez. I think Chris Wood versus Jimenez is pretty close. If there was a similar rest time for Brentford and for Forest, I think Chris Wood is a really nice pick, and Brentford do give up chances. And I keep telling myself that, yeah, Brentford give up chances. Brentford give up chances. But Jimenez is playing Southampton, who give up more chances, right? I have to keep reminding myself of that. So I do go back to the thought of Isak, Cunha, Jimenez. Is it just too much overthink not to go with a front three that looks like that? Good minutes, new relegation teams on penalties. Yeah, let's set it with that. In terms of things that could change, I don't particularly want to double up on any defense. I know the clean sheet odds are really good, but they're also really good for quite a lot of teams. So Leno is in because Sessegnon is not in. If, for example, I drop Cucurella and go Sessegnon, or I drop Trippier and go Sessegnon, it will probably be Sanchez or Pope that ends up. So I have to answer, is Leno Trippier better than Pope Sessegnon, for example? And it just comes down to how many minutes I think Sessegnon is likely to play. Outside of that, what else could change? It's Murphy versus Barnes. It's Mbeumo versus Diaz. It's Chris Wood versus Jimenez. I've got no one in that Thursday night game. But if that Thursday night game was a Saturday 3 o'clock game, I wouldn't pick anyone in that game. So that's why I've ended up with none of them in it, basically. But there is something nice about having that little bit of hope. And it shouldn't impact my decision making, but maybe it does if there's a close call. So this, as I said, we're basically at a boring is best draft at the moment. And I'm not saying it's not going to change between now and the deadline. Others on my bench, Trent, I've gone Estupinan, I've gone Jose Sarr as my third, Wolves and Burmo in there as well. So I'm pretty happy with the draft. There are a few things like double Chelsea, but it is Everton at home. Is Cunha definitely going to start? Jimenez, I've spoken about all of this. So this is where we're at. I'm pretty comfortable. Like, if we got to the deadline and this was my draft, I'd have absolutely no problem with it. I've spoken about it on Twitter. I actually hate free hit weeks because it's much easier in my mind to pick a player for the long term, 8 weeks, that might do well over those 8 game weeks. And also, you're only making 1 or 2 transfers. So you've only got 1 or 2 decisions to make when you're not on free hit. It's like, okay, I need to sell this player and I need to buy a forward. So I'm looking for one forward who's going to do well for the next 6 weeks. And that is a much narrower bracket and a much easier thing to do. That is much less likely to be punished because you're doing it for a longer period of time. Whereas on free hit, you've got, not only have you got 11 decisions to make, to be honest, I've got 20 decisions to make because every decision has a knock-on impact. For example, if I go Murphy to Barnes or I go with Sessegnon, then it changes another decision and it changes something else. So I really don't like free hit weeks, but we're on it. It's a nice week to free hit because there are a lot of options, but it also makes it a little bit more difficult to pick the players. So we're not going to rattle on too much. It will be decided on the deadline stream. I'm really honest with that my team is definitely not locked in. I really like how it looks now. I feel slightly more assured with it than trying to punt on someone like an Mbeumo and a Chris Wood in the same draft, which felt like they were just in there because of that Thursday night game. So I'm pretty happy with it. Please let me know what you think. Is there someone glaring or obvious that is not in it that you think I have to pick? Let me know. Or is there someone in it that I definitely shouldn't own? And I imagine that'll be Palmer and Cucurella probably. And maybe it's Jimenez and maybe it's Diaz as well. But should I go on Harvey Barnes? Is this too boring for a free hit? Or is free hit exciting enough on its own and you should just pick the best players that you think will score and be the most reliable for starts as well, which I feel like this is done. But that's where we're at. We spoke about captaincy earlier on in the video. Salah with the armband, Isak with the vice captain. If you want to be differential and you want a punt, just swap those two around. So that is all. As I said, it's going to go to the stream. I'm going to think about my draft a little bit more tonight. There is a stream that's already scheduled. Some of you may have already seen it. It's for the usual 2 hours before the deadline on Saturday morning as well. 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. for Gameweek 34. Free hit. We'll also be talking about those if you're not on free hit as well. But if you're not on free hit, stuff does feel a little bit easier for you all. So drop any questions you have about everything, who you'd pick if you're on my free hit in the comment section down below. And I do appreciate that what your rank is will change what you do on free hit a little bit and how aggressive you want to be versus not. But drop any questions you have in the comments. If we don't get them answered, bring them to the deadline stream on Saturday morning. Thank you all so much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here. And I'll be back again very soon.